Born in Texas in 1943, but raised in Vallejo within the San Francisco Bay Area, Sylvester Sly Stewart was the second of 5 children born into a deeply religious and musical family, with him and his siblings taking to performing as a group in different combinations from early on. A musical prodigy, he quickly mastered several instruments and learned to read and write music, attending Vallejo's only mixed-race high school, where he joined several different bands. Struck by his father's own anti-white racism, a natural byproduct of his tough Southern background, Sly early on made it his business to approach life beyond the confines of race, including developing a love of country music and rock and roll, alongside the jazz and gospel of his upbringing. After studying music formally at community college, he landed his first gig as a DJ for San Francisco soul station KSOL, where he took to mixing in Beatles and Rolling Stones 45s into his playlists. A pioneer even then, Sly became known for integrating the hipster slang of comic Lord Buckley into his between-song monologues, and actually bringing a keyboard into the studio to demonstrate compositional elements of the records as he played and critiqued them. At the same time, he garnered a formidable reputation as a record producer and session musician for Autumn Records, particularly in the genre now known as garage rock. He is responsible for a number of Nuggets-era classics from San Francisco-based groups such as the Beau Brummels and the Mojo Men, as well as producing the original version of White Rabbit by the Great Society, the band that later effectively became Jefferson Airplane. In fact, that song's composer, Grace Slick, has claimed that Sly in fact played every instrument on the track himself, as the band wasn't up to scratch at the time. He pulled together the original version of Sly and the Family Stone in late 1966, initially as a party band doing top 40 hits. Sly was joined by existing collaborators and friends, saxophonist Jerry Martini and trumpet player Cynthia Robinson, plus the standout members of his brother Freddie's band, in drummer Greg Errico and Fred Stone himself on guitar, plus Texan-based playing visionary Larry Graham, who was also Cynthia Robinson's cousin. While guitarist Freddie, and joining slightly later, keyboardist Rose Stone were at least initially Sly's only actual siblings in the group, the rest of the band was in the habit of describing themselves to literally be of the same family. And that speaks to their whole initial ethos as a mixed-race, mixed-gender band, combining the tidy discipline of the soul and R&B review with the scuzzy weirdness of psychedelic garage rock. For my money, it's the group's reliance more on the former than the latter that explains the commercial failure of their debut album, A Whole New Thing, released in October 1967 on CBS's Epic Records label. Stylistically, I would describe it as slightly weird soul, which probably prevented it from being the crossover hit that the band was hoping to deliver. Despite its lauded critical reputation, at least at time of release, I'm not particularly in love with it as an album outside of each side's opening tracks, which in all fairness make A Whole New Thing worth the price of admission alone. And those tracks specifically reveal Sly and the Family Stone's secret sauce, which I would say, at least initially, was drummer Greg Errico. For those interested in music production, drums are everything. The easiest way to date a piece of music is through the drum sound, as methods of miking and mixing drums over the decades have gone through very specific changes that are quite easy to hear if you know what to listen for. And 1967 is a pretty early time in either soul or rock for a drum sound to be this punchy and clear, which is to say, a fat, present-sounding kick drum and a tight snare that just cuts through the mix. While as producer, Sly was clearly sensitive to its importance as the backbone of the group's sound, Greg Errico himself deserves all the credit because he is clearly playing this way very deliberately, perhaps in the tradition of James Brown drummers Clyde Stubblefield and Jacko Starks, Bernard Purdie and Stax's Al Jackson Jr., because more than just his sound, it's his choice of parts. So Underdog, A Whole New Thing's first track and a song Sly had previously given to the Beau Brummels, and for the record, their version is laughably inferior, is an absolute banger, and an unbelievable album and career opener for Sly and the Family Stone, showcasing the horn section, group vocals, and the relentless funk of the rhythm section. Specifically, it's the way that Greg Errico pauses his drum part before dropping it back in on the fourth beat of the bar, just like a DJ might do.
Know how it feels, expect you get a fair share, but they won't let you forget you're the underdog, and you gotta be twice as good. Yeah, yeah! God.
His playing on this track alone explains why Sly and the Family Stone were later on so heavily sampled by the first generation of hip-hop producers. It's full and it's funky, almost as if it was deliberately designed to be sampled. Side 2's opener, I Cannot Make It, is also another 10 out of 10, and one I'm pretty sure I first heard as a sample in someone else's track. And then finally, LL Cool J famously looped the first few seconds of Trip to Your Heart from this album as well, a song that is interesting if not outstanding compared to those other two. But sadly, well before this became part of their wider legacy, their debut album bombed and a crushed Sly found himself back at the drawing board. With urging from label executive Clive Davis to go more commercial, the band relented with the track Dance to the Music and an album of the same name. A record the band itself hated and saw as a complete sellout, which nonetheless gave them the hit single they needed to launch their career proper. And while it is great for what it is, I can't help but understand why they felt that way. Almost every song on Dance to the Music is a rather simplistic, four-on-the-floor, Motown-y style rave-up, including the instructive lyrics, dance to the music, dance to the medley, ride the rhythm. The medley rightly became a staple of their live sets, and the track Are You Ready is iconic, but more importantly, a classic Sly and the Family Stone musical motif, which they developed on this record, and is also heard on the slightly less successful long player 1968 follow-up Life, is the a cappella vocal breakdown. Apparently the result of an accident in rehearsal where Sly forgot the lyrics to a song and started busking nonsensical vocals. Freddie and Larry joined in, and the a cappella vocal breakdown became a feature, a staple even, of many of their biggest tunes. Not only did Freddie and Larry share lead vocals on many tracks, Rose Stone's gospel-inspired co-leads that kind of complement the lead vocals in their songs really cemented Sly and the Family Stone's sound as a group. Goes to show what you can do with a band where nearly every member is a top-rate singer and a top-rate instrumentalist. The talent within this group was just explosive. And alongside those musical motifs in their songs, their stage presentation is where they really shined and would not have been possible were it not for their soul and R&B lineage. This included building up anticipation by having each member of the band walk out on stage separately to pick up their instrument one after the other in the style of King Curtis's Memphis Soul Stew, if you know that song. It also included being so well rehearsed that the end of each song went straight into the next, with synchronized dance moves that owed as much to the Motown Revue as it did to the church. They were also in the habit of jumping off stage and hambone dancing in the middle of the crowd, on occasion even leading crowds out of the venue and into the street to the beat of the music. Electrifying stuff. And in '68, while they had broken through to the mainstream, they were yet to prove their talent on record, at least until they came out with the album Stand in 1969, just before their iconic appearance at Woodstock. Stand is where they really came into their own, combining the high energy, dance party, funk, soul, R&B psychedelia with topical lyrics that specifically looked at the very American racial dynamics that the band itself existed to confront. 1968 had seen so much unrest come to a head in the country, specifically with the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and the American war in Vietnam enjoying its bloodiest year. By which I mean, nobody enjoyed it, obviously. So just as the civil rights and anti-war movements threatened to erupt into violence, here comes a mixed-race, mixed-gender band to give peace and love a shot in the arm, with a perspective that didn't trivialize or dumb down those progressive concerns, and a sound that just made you want to dance, making for a powerful combination. Stand's title track really captured the zeitgeist and also offers a glimpse into the band's future dysfunction in that its irrepressibly funky coda was added by Sly and other available session musicians as he was impatient for the Family Stone to make themselves available at such short notice. But it sets out their stall as a group, a kind of mission statement, and is musically an interesting example of a song, the whole structure of which is about cycling through key changes, all the while transposing the same melody up or down to either create resolve or to create excitement.
Stand, in the end, you'll still be you. One that's done all the things you set out to do. Stand,
Down to F.
there's a cross for you to bear. Things to go through if you're going anywhere.
Down to chorus.
chorus. Stand, stand.
And resolving right up there on the E flat. Although, going into the funky coda, it instead goes
Stand, stand
to the C.
stand. Na 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 na.
Everyday people, and you can make it if you try, also carry on Stan's theme of if everyone loves each other, we can change the world type of thing. Don't call me beep, Whitey. Don't call me Whitey, beep, is more or less exactly what it says on the tin. I want to take you higher, slaps. The whole thing is top-notch, and considered by many as the band's artistic high point as a musical collective. The Sing a Simple Song riff is one I mistakenly thought was a Jimi Hendrix thing, as he famously quotes it on his live album Band of Gypsies. Hendrix, of course, had the funk in him and so much more, but he didn't get the chance to really make it show, which is why I prefer the straight-ahead funk of Band of Gypsies, especially on account of Buddy Miles' hard-hitting funk drumming. Hendrix was always wary of straying too far from the admittedly incredible screaming psychedelia that brought him to fame, and it's a great shame that two otherwise perhaps like-minded geniuses like Sly and Hendrix, or even Miles Davis, never really had the chance to collaborate and take their concepts of fusion music higher, one way or the other. Hot Fun in the Summertime and Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself, again, later famously sampled by Janet Jackson, made for excellent standalone singles in 1969, with the latter popularizing the concept of slap bass. And as a quick note on that, Larry Graham had developed the technique earlier when playing in a two-piece with his pianist/vocalist mother. Firstly, the thumb was to represent the thump of a kick drum on the low strings, with a pluck on the high strings to replicate the pop of a snare drum. This is why he refers to the technique as thumpin' and pluckin' rather than slap bass, which makes sense when you consider slap bass is actually an upright or double bass technique. Whatever you want to call it, on top of all of Sly and the Family Stone's innovation as a group, they introduced this sound to the world with Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again. With the single being the band's last release for almost 2 years. This recording hiatus was partly due to heavy demand on the group on the touring circuit, including legendary festival appearances that year at the Harlem Cultural Festival, Newport Jazz, and Woodstock. But it was also because alongside their sudden success came drugs. Lots and lots of lovely drugs. And this fame and the access to the spoils of fame meant that from this point onwards, things gradually became more about Sly than it did the Family Stone. For starters, he relocated the whole band to the center of the music industry in Los Angeles, coincidentally, also the center of the American drug trade. And while I've never literally believed that places can be evil or have a sinister energy of their own, not only did LA bring out the very worst in Sly and everyone else in the band, the fact that they all moved into a mansion formerly owned by Papa John Phillips, one of rock and roll's single darkest, if not the darkest figure, could not have helped things, to put it mildly. Add to that an army of coke-addled hangers-on, including Billy Preston, Miles Davis, Ike Turner, Bobby Womack, and Terry Melcher. Perhaps with the exception of Billy Preston, I couldn't imagine a more inauspicious rogues gallery than that, as far as getting anything productive done. And by now, in 1970, Sly and the Family Stone were all proper superstars. And rather than embrace that opportunity to make music as he had done before, he instead felt stifled by the pressure from the record company to deliver product. And I mean that without judgment, as that kind of pressure must have been relentless and indeed creatively inhibiting, which most likely, in turn, fueled further drug abuse. Also, like Hendrix, around the same time, Sly was feeling the pressure from the white rock movement to act as some kind of figurehead representing all black people, alongside pressure from the Black Panthers on the other side, to sack all of the white people in his band, endorse their movement, and take on a more militant, perhaps divisive political stance. Which was, like with Hendrix, not true to his politics really at all. In response to all of these pressures, Sly's professionalism began to slip. He started being late for gigs, sometimes not showing up at all, with riots breaking out at their shows as a result. And it's worth saying as well that this was at a time where anxiety, which was ultimately the root cause of Sly's problems, not the drugs, which were in fact a symptom, was far less understood as it is now. Drugs became an easy fallback and an antidote to that anxiety, as you might imagine. And from all reports, graduating from abusing prodigious amounts of cocaine to PCP really accelerated Sly's undoing. And you can hear all of this on 1971's There's a Riot Going On, an album that took 2.5 years to make, if that gives you a sense of how much Sly and the Family Stone had slowed down productivity-wise. This is of course nothing compared to modern standards, I might add. Nonetheless, it's quite rightly considered a masterpiece, but on the subject of politics, it's not exactly the topical state of the nation finger-on-the-pulse document that its title or cover would have you believe. While its title was conceived as a literal response to Marvin Gaye's conceptual progressive soul triumph, What's Going On?, the riot it describes is not the one going on out there, but instead the one going on inside the increasingly fevered imagination of Sly Stone himself. I don't need to tell you that it's an extremely important, excellent, and influential record, but its relevance to Fresh is that, having ditched the sunny optimism that had brought Sly and the Family Stone to great fame, Sly would both continue with Riot's inward-looking themes on Fresh, but perhaps more significantly, the production on Riot shares a famously muddy, murky, oppressive atmosphere with Fresh that somehow only enhances the themes of its songs and its low-down and dirty brand of funk. A big part of this is the heavy use of the Maestro Rhythm King MRK2 drum machine, initially used to demo the songs in lieu of a drummer, but eventually becoming key to the arrangements of the songs alongside actual acoustic drums. But moreover, it was Sly's drug-fueled perfectionism that caused him to record and re-record parts over and over again that mostly contributes to the album's sound, with analog tape famously degrading the more you record and wipe. This is not the same band that had played together so harmoniously as a unit on the band's first 4 albums. Of Riot's 3 singles, Family Affair is also rightly considered an absolute classic, and the last and by far the biggest of the band's 3 #1 hits in their career. It was also key to crossing Sly and the Family Stone back over to black radio, and his laid-back, coke-throttled voice again could not do more to demonstrate to us that this is no longer the man who delivered us Stand way back in '69. It's worth noting as well just how enormously influential Riot was on the hip-hop music of the coming decades. Critically, Riot was the point where critics stopped going on about Sly and the Family Stone's integrationist positivity and instead started calling him a 2-bit gangster, a jumped-up pimp with too much fame, too much money, and too many drugs. While some of that was true, this is ultimately just white liberals hating on a black man, who is no longer, whether for political reasons or personal ones, making white liberals feel good about the state of the world and the state of America in 1971. But personal politics within the band were proving fractious, hardly surprising considering how much of Riot is rumoured to be recorded by Sly and Sly alone. Drummer Greg Errico being the first to leave the group just after its release, and Larry Graham's exit from the band in 1972 really signalled a major change, particularly in relation to Sly's increasing paranoia and habit of burning bridges with just about everyone. So unlike the majority of the albums in my Lost Masterpieces series, Fresh was for the most part lauded by the critics at the time and sold perfectly well, reaching number 7 on the US pop album charts and number 1 on the soul album charts in 1973. I think it's fair to say, however, that classic rock culture has largely forgotten it, preferring the comforting liberal idealism of Stand as opposed to Fresh's weird, druggy insularity. That market was instead sewn up in the minds of Rolling Stone readers by There's a Riot Going On, helped in no small part by its trendy surface-level political themes, which I don't think it really has, in all fairness. Of course, Riot is a masterpiece, but it's not controversial to suggest that it unfairly overshadows Fresh. Fresh is, of course, a perhaps uncomfortable reminder that this is basically Sly and the Family Stone's last stand, as their downward slide, while not as drastic as it's commonly thought of, definitely started after this point, and it certainly represents the beginning of the end for Sly and the Family Stone, who technically limped on for another decade, but continued as a band really in name only. Famously, Fresh's follow-up Small Talk was released the following year, coinciding with Sly's public marriage to Kathy Silver as part of a concert at Madison Square Garden. Their marriage lasted only 6 months, but resulted in the birth of his only son, Sylvester Jr. He later on also fathered a daughter, Sylviette, with bandmate Cynthia Robinson. In 1975, the band more or less disintegrated, following a series of disastrous and poorly attended gigs at New York's Radio City Music Hall, with Sly releasing his first solo album the same year. Sly and the Family Stone technically continued as more or less a Sly Stone solo project at the same time, with diminishing returns, releasing 3 more underwhelming albums before their, let's say, legal dissolution in 1983. Unsurprisingly, the 40 or so subsequent years until Sly's 2025 death were made up of failed comebacks, business and management difficulties, and a whole lot of drugs. He spent most of the 80s doing crack cocaine with George Clinton and moving in and out of jail or rehab and back again. He also made a notable surprise appearance at Sly and the Family Stone's 1993 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame acceptance ceremony, and appeared sporadically, and not to break a habit of a lifetime, usually late, on stage with various incarnations of a revived Family Stone band in his final years. Of course, it's nothing short of a miracle that the man made it to the ripe old age of 82 considering his lifestyle. If you liked this video, please do me a favor and hit the like button, but if you didn't, rather than hit the dislike button, can I suggest you leave a comment and let me know why? I'm always open to feedback, advice, and opinions that challenge mine, plus it apparently helps me game YouTube's algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it will let you know whenever I put something new up. You can follow me on all the socials if you're so inclined, and if you'd like to incentivize me with a $5 a month to continue doing these videos, a link to my Patreon should be just beneath this video. Cheers.